Basically Biblical. We have a guest today. Her name is Gena. I'm saying that right, aren't I? Gena?
Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
I typically ask beforehand and I just completely blank. But Gena Anderson, she is an author, not just an author, but kind of the focus here is going to be the author side of what she does. I got in touch with her on Facebook, a group that we were both in. Actually, ended up getting a copy of a devotional that she has, or a Bible study that she has written on the Book of James. It was I really really enjoyed it. But before we go any further in that, I'll throw it over, and Gena, you can throw out anything that you want to. That's kind of an introduction to let people know who you are.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Gena Anderson and I'm really excited to be here. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I told you before, I've listened to some of your podcasts and you guys have really in-depth and interesting conversations, and those are my favorite kind. And so I'm glad to be here. And I live in, just so people know a little bit about me, I live in Central Texas outside of Austin. And I have been, as far as writing a Bible study and being a Christian author, I've been a Bible study leader and just kind of in love with the word for over a decade now, and just started writing kind of for fun and thought I would never ever share my writing with the public. And then the Lord said, no. And so step by step, he kind of took me through a process where I ended up publishing a book, and then subsequently later this Bible study. And I'm excited to get into and talk about it. Actually, fun fact, I've done a lot of podcast interviews, but they're usually about my book, and no excuses, the Bible study is a little bit left out. And I've actually never done a podcast just focused on the James Bible study. So I'm really excited for the book. I think the book deserves this. I think the Bible study deserves this chance to be talked about.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it was, like I said, I think when we first started talking, I didn't even realize that you had written another book previously. I was only aware of the Bible study, and I know, and we'll get into this a little bit more later on, but you have another one coming out that I think is going to pair really, really well with the Book of James. Um, so just for anyone that's not aware, the Book of James, it's fairly short. There's only 5 chapters in the Book of James, but there is a ton of just content information, even for it being such a small book. There's so much that you can split apart and dive into and really, really grasp onto. It's one of my favorites to read through. We actually are going through here on the channel. We're going through the Gospel of John, and originally our plan was we were going to do the Book of James first. We ended up settling on the Gospel of John, just uh, as our target audience here is new believers and things like that, and so I wanted to do kind of more of an introduction of who Jesus was first. But I think our plan after we get through John is probably to go to James. So it's definitely one that I enjoy. And I'll say too, I've done I've I've done a handful of devotionals, Bible studies, things like that on the Book of James, and I will say I think yours has probably been the one that I've enjoyed the most going through. Um, I
What
think you
was it
did.
about it that you liked so much about the study?
I
I'm
think
just curious.
what I really liked was stuck out to me is how you broke it down. I think there's been a lot of them that I've done, and it's more just like a full chapter at once. And I think that you did a better job of kind of breaking it down more.
Mm,
Um, I guess maybe like subject matter would be the correct term,
yeah.
but kind of focusing in and not getting caught up in. I think a lot of people see James and then think, okay, well, this is 5 chapters, so we can go through a chapter a day and you can get this Bible study done in a week. And I think that there's a lot that just gets glossed over if you do that.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
and so I like how you broke it down and kind of focused in on the specific areas. Um, it was really, really good. So I want to start off, I guess. I know you said that uh, you've been doing this for a while. Typically, you hear people talk about how when you first hear about like maybe an actor or a musician or something like that, that just boom, they come onto the scene as a quote unquote overnight success. They're actually an overnight success that's like 20
That
years
didn't
in the
really happen that
making.
way.
Right. And so I hear, you said that, yeah, you did this, but you've been doing Bible studies for a long time. Um, and I know you even put in your dedication at the beginning of your book to the ladies that you've been doing this with. So I guess what really led you to start with the book of James? And then maybe how is your process for, because I think it's going to be different than just sitting down with somebody, because you almost have to think ahead at some questions that are going to be brought up and try to answer them in what you're putting in the book. So what would be your process for, I guess, deciding on the book of James and then kind of getting in there and really trying to parse it out for somebody that's going to read it when you're not with them?
Right, right. Well, I think the church answer for what led me to write the book, the Bible study, it's called No Excuses, and it's on the book of James. I think the church answer is that God led me to, but but the kind of how that happened, actually. So I have led a women's Bible study for a number of years, and we've gone through many studies, and I've participated as a participant and gone through many studies, and there was just a season where I was looking for a study for us to go through, and nothing was really, nothing seemed like it fit. And personally, I just love going through, taking a book of the Bible and going start to finish. And for new believers, anything in the New Testament is a great place to start. I mean, I don't know, Revelation might be a little bit much, but but the Gospels are, like you said, going through John. That's a fantastic place to start. But so I was looking for something for my Bible study group, and I thought, well, James is, it's only 5 chapters. And so why don't we just go through a book of the Bible? We had done that with other books a time or two. And I thought this time I'll actually write lessons for us. And I thought to myself, it won't be that hard or that much work. It'll be fine. It's just 5 chapters. But as you pointed out, I mean, the Bible tends to be like this, but
Yeah.
every passage is so rich and there's so much behind it. I mean, I made it a 5 week Bible study, but it could be 10 weeks, it could be 12 weeks. I mean, you could dive deeper and deeper. Um, but I like a Bible study, and I say this at the beginning in the intro, but I like a Bible study that has some depth to it, but it's doable. Like someone who
Yeah.
has a day job and who has a life and other things to do and wants to have a meaningful devotion time in the morning or in the evening or whatever works for you, that they can actually get into it and understand. So that's what I set out to do. And I wrote this Bible study for my Bible study group. And then once I got done with it, I thought, well, maybe I should look into publishing it. And so then I spent a lot of time, it actually took me probably about 2 years to finish it. Just, working on it here and there. But why James, and like how the process is for me, is once I got into it, I just fell in love with the book of James. And probably for some of the same reasons that you said you really like it. I like to write in a way that provides information and practical application. Like I'm all about the practical application. I want to understand what the word is saying, and then I want to know, how can I apply this in my life? And so I think that actually James is, it's got to be one of, or maybe the top book for that in the Bible. There's just so much practical wisdom, and he really spells out, this is what you should do. This is how we should live. This is not what you should do. This is not how we should live. And I called it No Excuses because that's what it felt like going through the book, that he was over and over again saying, like,
Yeah.
I'm not taking your excuses. I'm not giving you any excuses. Like, this is it, period, end of story. This is how it goes. So when I went through it, it's such a good question, an interesting question, how to decipher where to focus. Um, I went through it personally myself first, the book of James, and what stood out to me, and then going through it with a Bible study group, I was able to hear what were the questions they had, and things that they found interesting or found difficult to understand or found really meaningful. And some of it was the same as what I did, and some of it was different. So I was able to take their perspective and put it in there too. And then also, when you're doing a Bible study, you're kind of getting into the background behind it, and you uncover a lot of things that maybe you didn't know previously that you think someone reading would also find interesting. So and it really is kind of a deciphering process, because you could go so deep. So then it's kind of like, what's going to be the most meaningful that for this reader? Like, what are they going to be thinking when they read this? And that's what I really tried to keep in mind as I went through it.
Yeah, I like that. So I will. I think I'd agree with what you said. I think one reason that I've kind of been drawn to the Book of James, I really like apologetics, and so the whole idea of uh, I've done a little bit here on the channel, but just being able to give a defense for the faith that we have, and I've once I really started getting into apologetics, I started becoming more drawn to the Book of James, because I think James is a really um, the story of James is really good evidence for Jesus being who he said he was and Christianity being true, because up to the point of Jesus' death, through Jesus' entire ministry, for anyone that doesn't know, James is the brother or half brother of Jesus. And so, imagine being in that situation where you're told that your sibling is the savior of the world, the Messiah. Um, no matter how well behaved or good they are, you're probably never going to believe it. And so, James, through Jesus' entire ministry, really did not believe, and he finally did come around after the death, burial, resurrection, and then ascension. And so I think just for me, liking the apologetic side of it, I'm kind of drawn to James' story, but then seeing how he um, kind of presents the truths and the things that he talks about in the letter that he writes there, I think is very, very interesting, and it stands out from a lot of the other books or letters that we see. It's kind of more of I think, a broad scope, and it's not as much targeted towards a like specifically a Jewish audience like
Yeah.
some of the others are. And so it's it's definitely, I think it stands out. It makes it for a very, very interesting read. Um, but no, it's just it's a phenomenal book. I will say too, I think you mentioned one of your goals was you wanted it to be something that someone could sit down and read for a few minutes or something in the morning before they would go to work or after they got home. Or and I did find I actually I felt like it went really, really well with that. There was enough that I felt like I was definitely getting something out of it, but I didn't feel like I was trying to rush to get through it to make sure I had enough time. I didn't have to, adjust my schedule, anything like that. Like, it fit really well with, like, if you're going to give yourself 10, 15 minutes to just sit in the morning, even 20 minutes. And I really like kind of how you break down, you give some commentary and stuff like that, but you're pulling the verses into just a really, really phenomenal job, I think. I do
Thank you for that.
have, yeah, um,
Well, and if I can say, I agree with
yeah,
you. That was another thing. I just find that there's a little bit of James in all of us. I mean, especially someone who's a new believer. But
Yeah.
my background in Christianity, I grew up going to church, and I was saved, like made a profession of faith. I grew up in a Baptist church and made a profession of faith as a child when I was 7. But I didn't, so I can't say I wasn't a believer. I was, but I didn't live a life of faith. I did not do any of the things that James um, talks about. Um, and
Can
so
relate.
so yeah. So I think that there's a little bit of James in all of us, in whether you're a new believer or just, have walked through some struggles with your in your faith throughout your life. Um, just I think we can relate to the idea of doubting and, not always accepting. And
Yeah.
then once James really believed, and after Jesus died and was resurrected, and he truly became a believer, I mean, he's just, you can tell in his words, he's just so all in. And so I think it's something to aspire to. Like, it's inspiring and also relatable. It's a relatable story.
Yeah, and I think I hadn't thought about this until you were just saying that, but I have a similar background. I was born and raised in church. For the first, I think I was until I was like 8 or 9 years old. We actually lived across the street from the church that I went to, and so like anytime the church doors were open, we were in the church building, and it got to where it was very um, familiar, I guess. And so
Yes.
I didn't have and for a while I was actually jealous of, I would hear people that had this really big, amazing come to Jesus moment where
Yeah.
they're really like they're strung out on drugs and they have this like horrible life and all this stuff going on, and then they just like God just appears to them, they hear the voice of God, and they're just like have this huge change. Whereas I mean, I'm a church kid, I grew up as a pastor's kid, and so I never really like had that story. But I do kind of see some similarities. Like I said, as you were talking, it really started hitting me that I think that kind of not exactly, but that kind of reflects in James' story as well. That familiarity, why he
Yeah.
didn't believe. He knew Jesus as his brother, and he knew Jesus as his brother for years before he ever knew Jesus as his Lord. Um, and so that the whole saying familiarity breeds contempt. And so I think that can be something that we do see kind of a connection there with James and his story leading up to him writing this. Um, I do want to see. I know you mentioned that as you're going through uh, researching and doing kind of digging in and getting some background context and things like that while you're writing this. What do you think? And if you have more than one, you can give more than one. But what was the uh, maybe like the most interesting or most surprising or something that you really didn't expect, or like maybe the thing that moved you the most as you were really getting in and studying this? Just what really stood out to you the most that maybe if you're just reading casually you wouldn't pick up?
You know, oh, there's so much. I think I could pick a couple of things that stood out to me, and I will say, when I first started reading James, the one of the first things that really stood out to me was in chapter 1, when he talks about not being double-minded. And so let's see if I can even pull up the verses here. He talks about not, when we're asking, okay, here it is. Um, Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting, for the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double minded and unstable in all his ways. And so this idea of being double-minded, and I think in the study I refer to it as, it's when we say we believe in God and we say we trust God, but then on the other hand, our actions, tell a different story. And when I read that, I was literally going through a season where I was looking for, I was wanting to get a different job. I had gone through school to become a nurse practitioner, and there was a actually specific job that years ago God had told me, that I was going to work at this clinic. Like I had been there for a rotation in school, and I had just felt him say to me, not audibly out loud, but just in my spirit, just felt him say, "This is where you're going to work one day." And at the time, it's a long story, but that didn't even make sense. But fast forward a number of years, I went to nurse practitioner school, and I knew God had told me I was going to work there. But I was waiting for months for this job to open, and it wasn't opening. And of course, then I'm getting impatient, and I'm starting to apply for other jobs, and I'm doubting, and I'm double-minded is what I realized. When I read that, I thought, "Oh my gosh, that's me." Like God already told me I'm going to have this job. And I know, I believe in him. I have faith in him. God's not a liar. But I'm applying for other jobs. I'm talking to other people about this. I'm doubting. And then, if you get to, if you fast forward to, I think it's in chapter 4. Um, I have to think. Of
You're
where,
good.
well, there's later in James that he then also says, to not, above all, don't make oaths. Like, don't make oaths above all. And that would have been that would have been like my number one surprise, because I thought, above all, don't make oaths. Like, all this you're talking about, James, that we're supposed to do and not do. We're supposed to be humble, and we're supposed to have works with our faith, and we're not supposed to show favoritism, and we're not supposed to have pride, and all of these things that he talks about. And then, above all, we're not supposed to make oaths. So I really dug into that, because I'm like, what does that mean? But what I uncovered is that making an oath is basically a manipulation. Like, it's saying, I promise to you, I swear that I'm going to do this thing. But the religious people of the time, of James's time, would then use higher religious obligations, things they interpreted or felt were higher religious obligations, to get out of those oaths. And so again, it goes back to this concept of this double nature. Like, where are you really committed to? Who do you really believe in? And I mean, Jesus wants our whole heart, and he wants us to have full faith in him. So I would say that part about the oaths is was the most surprising to me, like, just something that I really had to dig into, and what does this really mean? But the double-mindedness is what spoke to me personally in my life the most.
There's so much that you can dig into with it. If anyone's not read, I've had there's one that really sticks out to me, and I still have it kind of memorized. So I had struggled with some addiction stuff previously, and in that, one thing that I did was I had, and I recommend anybody do this, with whatever you may be going through. Find verses that deal with that specific thing, and just focus on those verses. Really, hide those words in your heart, and so that way, when temptation comes, or when issues come up, struggles come up, you're able to quickly pull those out and stand on those as God's word. But I know, just from struggles with I've had myself previously. James 4, it says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. Cling to God. Is one that I've stuck with for a long time. I mentioned apologetics as being something that I really, really like. And one thing that really, kind of was, I don't know if I want to say discouraging to me, lack of a better word, I guess, discouraging to me, is as I'm getting in and kind of studying some of this, and some of this coincides with the podcast starting up and things like that, I would get worried that um, someone may have a question that I'm not able to answer, or I can't find an answer to, or what if I'm studying and I come across something that I don't know an answer for and I can't get an answer to, or and then James, it says that if you seek knowledge, ask for your Father and He's going to give it to you. And so
Mhm.
there's that. There's talking about trials and tribulations, and consider it pure joy. That's one I've done. So I kind of started doing this similar process when we were going to do the Bible study in James, and I know for me it really stuck out with that um, at the beginning of James when he's talking about to consider it pure joy when you're faced with trials of any kind. Um, that the I don't remember the exact Greek word, but that word this he uses for joy is the same word that is used when it's talking about Mary saying that the tomb was empty. And
Mm.
so, I mean, that really puts it on a whole nother level. It's not just a, you know, bearing, bear down and grit it, or just put a smile on and act like it's not bothering you. Like, really, like, realize that going through this stuff is it's going to create perseverance. It's going to help make you spiritually stronger.
Mhm.
um, it's going to end up being a benefit for you as long as you're able to cling to God and go through this. And so there is, I think, I think there's times where our translating it to another language can take a lot from the original meaning. And so I typically encourage people, if you're going through, and you've hinted at this too, take time to actually go through a book and like just go through the full book, and not necessarily a topical study. I think there's a time and a place for both topical and like a verse by verse study, but I think that having that, going through a verse at a time and taking the time to actually dig into some of the original language and see like what was actually, like, why is this translated to this, or looking at different translations as you're going through, and really digging in, I think can really bring a lot of scripture to life in a different way than if you're just, like I said, just reading through casually. There's so much more that you can get out of it, especially like I said, James is just it's a phenomenal book, and anyone that has not read through definitely needs to do so.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'll add to that. I like that part too. That consider it pure joy. Just the fact that it's a joy, but it's there's this sense of it making us pure when we go through hardships with Jesus, and and I will say that with the book of James in particular, it can feel like at times that even verse to verse, it can sometimes feel like he's jumping topics. Like he's there's he's talking about this thing, and the next thing you know he switches to another thing. But if you read the whole book, and it's only 5 chapters, I've already said that a bunch of times, only 5 chapters, it's not a lot of words really. I mean, I read it earlier today in one day just to refresh my memory because I
yeah.
haven't read it in a little while. And so if you read the whole book, you start to see these recurring themes and how he repeats it and connects things. And so by the end, it really is a whole message that he's putting across, but it doesn't seem like that if you just read one piece of it.
Oh yeah, and it's I think it's a good picture of really the rest of the Bible too. That there are, I mean, obviously for James, there's only one author, but with the rest of the Bible, we have so many different authors and so many different genres and topics and things like that. But they mesh together perfectly. Um, and so you see that in James too, that he jumps around to these different topics, different issues, and it at times it can seem kind of flippant, for lack of a better term. Um, but he does, I mean, he ties it all back together. Hey, everybody, appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn the bell notifications on so you always see when we come out with new content, because we come out with new content every single week, 2 videos a week and shorts throughout the week, as well as different random stuff we'll put on social media. We also have, with Basically Biblical, a new company we are starting, On Fire Productions. You can check them out on Instagram. A lot of really awesome content that's going to be coming out with them. Music, kids content, movies, TV shows, anything that you can think of, we're going to get into it, and it's all going to be faith-based. But you can go check them out on different social medias. In the meantime, there will be a video up here that we think that you will probably like, as well as a playlist down here that should be more content that you will enjoy. So thanks. God bless.